All right, guys. Well, welcome to Next Level by Association. And really, this is a thing that I started several years ago called the conversation matters. And I think every one of us on this call would agree that the conversation is what matters. And a lot of times we've got people that are just bending our ear about just nonsense and people that are just kind of filling up empty space. And what I really wanted to do is always have great conversation with people. And I've been very, very blessed to have some great mentors in my life, some great people in my life. And as you know, as my mentors have taught me over the years, it's always best to have a meaningful conversation, one that actually has merit. So that's part of this conversation tonight. And I'll just give you some background how this all happened. Last week or so, I just started feeling it was on my heart to just kind of reach out and have conversations with people and, have conversations with people from the Black community, from whatever communities. And I thought, I would love to address some of these issues that I'm hearing about. I would love to talk about racism, and I would love to talk about and be a support system for people that are dealing with this. But let's be honest, I'm a middle-aged white guy, and I don't have the experience to talk about that. And so I felt really inadequate even to talk about it. I mean, even to go online and say, hey, Black Lives Matter or what, anything. I just felt ignorant to say that. And so I was really careful and didn't really post a lot. And then a couple of days ago, I said, I'm going to do something. I'm just going to host a kind of a town hall forum and let people talk. And I'm going to bring in, some people that I know that are really, really knowledgeable and have experienced this firsthand. And so I started reaching out. Now, you can imagine my conversation. I didn't really quite know. I was just telling some of the panel people, I was like, I don't really know what to say. So I just kind of reached out and said, look, I'm not the guy. I don't know what you've dealt with, and I don't know anything about this on a firsthand basis. And so I'm ignorant. So just understand that if I say something stupid, it's just because I'm ignorant, that I don't know. Or if I phrase something the wrong way, and I just reached out and said, but I would really like to have this. And every one of them was so welcoming and said, absolutely, we love this. We would love to do this. And Kasim Osgood up there, my buddy, he was, I think, one of the first people I called. And I was kind of like, let's see how we'll test it on Kasim and see what he says. And but let me just give you an update on some of the panel guys. We have just some amazing people on here. And, I'm just going to go through the list as I see them. Kasim Osgood is a great friend of mine, a brother. Man, we've seen some tough times together. We've seen some great times together. He's a 3-time Pro Bowl player in the NFL. Retired a couple of years ago from, and just, this guy is just a rock and just a solid individual. And I love him like a brother and grateful for him in my life. Irvin, this is a guy I met at Lee Steinberg's Super Bowl party, or no, at his birthday party. Yeah, it's a birthday party. And we just hit it off. I mean, we met at the door and we stood at the door probably for the first hour, just having great conversation with he and his wife, Tracy. And it was just a blessing. And to develop the relationship over this last couple of years, I've just really, really appreciated him. I mean, he's, the head of Genesis Motor Corp. He's got a huge, long history in that industry, and rock solid human being. Is the kind of guy that you want to sit down and have a conversation with, because he gives thought to it. And it's a pleasure to have him in my life and to have him here. So I've got to go down this list here. Tommy Baylor, man. Tommy Baylor is a very, very dear friend of mine. We met at a speaking engagement, and we ended up spending a couple of minutes, and all of a sudden the next morning we had a 3-hour breakfast and just talked about everything. It was amazing. And Tommy, he's everyone I'm not talking about, I don't want to repeat myself, but every person I'm going to introduce you are people that are absolutely quality people that I would trust my life with. I would trust my children's lives with. I mean, these are just quality people. And Tommy, one of his accolades, he wrote "She's Out of My Life" for Michael Jackson. He's also one of the co-producers of "We Are the World." Just an amazing individual, has a lot of depth of experience with people and what people have dealt with. Get to know him. Richard Gillum. Richard I met him again at Lee Steinberg's birthday party. that I think you were hosting. Yeah, you hosted it. And we had a great time. And we just had a blast. So it was a lot of fun. And such a quality guy, just a great guy to get to know. So any of these people, I would definitely encourage you to get to know them. I just got reminded to send this over to Facebook. So let me send this over to Facebook and see what we can do. Sorry for the delay, guys. I didn't want to do it prematurely because I wanted you guys to have some experience before. Let's see, time. Let's see. Okay, it looks like it's gonna work. Maybe it's been hit and miss sometimes in the last couple of months, but I'll come back and finish the introductions. This is being recorded, so it'll be up in the members area later. Just minutes. And we'll go live. Go live. Let's see. Apologize, guys. Technical difficulties with Zoom and Facebook. They have not been playing well together lately.
It's on Facebook.
It is?
It says the meeting is now on Facebook. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
It's streaming.
Cool.
Yeah, it's streaming.
All right, good deal. So, let me, anyways, we have Richard and then Mike Yoder. Mike Yoder has become a very, very dear friend over the last 7 or 8 years. I'll tell you how we got to know each other was we were dating the same person. And she slipped and kind of let us know that we become really, really good friends. It was great. It was great. And I always say that because it was just a fun story. Mike is a amazing videographer. He's got some great documentaries that he's working on that you guys are going to want to learn about as well. Phenomenal human being, quality. Wesley Gu is a speaker, a trainer, an artist, a musician, a songwriter. I mean, this guy is the real deal when it comes to being a well-rounded individual, as well as he's amazing when it comes to asking great questions, and he's a very good thinker. If you've ever been around somebody who's a thinker, sometimes it's great, and then sometimes it's frustrating as hell because they just challenge you on every corner. And that can be Wesley from time to time, but phenomenal human being, and I'm very, very appreciative to call him my brother. Karen Toddy. Karen is a friend of mine from back in Temecula, and she is in the real estate industry, and amazing woman. I've gotten a chance to spend some time with her and her husband, and this couple's just good people. And I love her heart. She's got a great heart. So this will be a lot of great information from her. Let's see. Rob, I have not gotten a chance to meet you, but Irvin's told me a little bit about you. Former police officer, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm just expecting him to give us some real depth, and I know he will, because Irvin would not have put him on. and I appreciate you just stepping in right at the last minute.
No problem at all.
Yeah, appreciate it. Let's see. Make sure I'm going through the list. Let's see. Sorry, guys. I just don't want to miss any. Corey Minor. Corey Minor is my brother. He is a good man. He played football at Notre Dame and then went on to the NFL and played. Amazing guy. He's got a great story. He's got a great heart. Man, this guy is Mr. Enthusiasm. And he's got a great attitude about everything in life. And so I definitely wanted him to chime in tonight too. So that's going to be a real good time. So he's on the panel. Let's see, Michael. Okay, I think we're Bill Janishek. Bill Janishek is a dear friend of mine, colleague, member of Next Level by Association, phenomenal individual, charter member of Next Level by Association. And Bill, you're on the panel tonight, so you can bring yourself on camera and stay on when everyone else goes off. And he's a chiropractor in Yorba Linda. He owns Yorba Linda Family Chiropractic. Phenomenal human being. Let's see. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any of our panelists. I saw. Is Tracy ready now? You think? I'm gonna bring her on. Let's see if we just bring her on. See what she says.
Hey, Bob, I'm also here now.
Okay, cool. There we go. So while we're waiting for Tracy, you can bring yourself on. This is Corey Chapman. Corey Chapman and I met when I was living on my boat in Marina del Rey. I got to know he and his wife and his kids, amazing family. He is a wealth strategist, and just all around great guy. You ever want to just be around somebody that'll lift you up? He's the guy. And it's always great having him, and I've spent holidays with he and his family. I've spent time down, and we've done some fun things together. So I appreciate him being on here. Let's see. Tracy, I don't see you right now, but I want to make
Tracy
sure.
is on, Bob, but she says under no circumstance will you see her video.
Okay, but you're on.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Tracy, welcome. Tracy is Irvin's wife, and I'm telling you, she is very sharp. And I love her attitude. I like her can-do attitude. I love the time that we spent getting to know her. She really took my daughter under her wing and really loved on her. And she is just, and again, quality person. But she's also got so much depth that I was really excited that she was able to hop on, and she'll be able to weigh in tonight. So thanks for being here, Tracy.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Perfect.
Perfect.
Let's see. I think, let's see. I see a couple more guests, a couple more. George Chanos is on there somewhere. I just can't see him. But I did see him earlier. So
I'm here,
George Chanos, there he is. George Chanos is really a good guy, good friend. We've become friends over the last couple of years. We met at a speaking engagement, Think and Grow Rich, and we just kind of bonded, had a great dinner together, and then we've had subsequent dinners at his house, at restaurants, and just he and his wife are just really great people. On top of that, he's also an author of a great book called, I want to say it, Millennial Samurai. Right. Samurai. I want to say it right. And he's also the former Attorney General for the state of Nevada. So we wanted him on to give us some other experience and some other side. So I think we are done with the introductions. Guys, the reason that's important is because I want you to know who you're listening to, and I want you to know something about them other than just what they did, but also or what they've done or what they're in the process of doing. So we're going to ask everyone who's not a panelist to go ahead and shut your camera and mics off so that it's only going to be this. What we'll do is I'm going to start off and have some questions, let people answer, and then what we'll do is we'll bring you guys all back on, and you can ask questions and get some direct feedback from some quality people.
Bob, who are the panelists?
Everyone I just announced.
Oh, all those people. Okay.
Yep, those are the panelists.
My camera on?
Yes, leave your camera on. Let's see. Anybody else? If you've got your camera on, let's see, we're going to do this. There we go. Should show. Perfect. All right, guys. Hey, first thing I'm going to do, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for indulging in my desire to really learn and understand more about what's going on. I know that there's a lot of people that are completely in the dark, and from every race and religion and everything else that are completely in the dark of what's going on. They think they maybe know what's going on, but they're confused, or they've been misled. And yet the reason I've asked you guys to be panelists is because I know that you guys have depth, and I know that you actually understand what's going on. And not only that, but you also want to continue to grow. So let me just pause everyone's video. There we go. And so I'm just grateful that you're on, and I'm grateful that you have taken the time to be here as a panelist or just to be here as a friend. And I'm going to start off with one question. And I'm going to let each one of you answer it, and we'll just go straight across the board. What does racism mean to you? Kasim, what does racism mean to you?
I think for me, racism is a display of a lack of knowledge, lack of empathy. Sort of, I think as humans, we have a tendency to create a hierarchy for whatever it is we're doing. We choose favorites, and we try to elevate ourselves to be the favorite for everybody. And outside of your in-group, the people that look like you, that are in your same status or class, I would say, they don't get the same recognition or respect because they're not like you. Right. So I guess in differences, we try to find ways to rationalize what those differences mean, and we give it a rank and file, I guess. And people can attribute that to anything, whether it be color, religion, sex, and it happens often, and it becomes so ingrained in who we are and our daily habits that we sort of turn a blind eye to the negative impact and negative ramifications of what it actually inflicts on those that we sort of cast to a lower level than we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
The reason I want to ask this is, and I know but everyone has their own idea and definition and wording of it. And I think what we'll do is we'll get a lot more depth about what that terminology means, what the terminology means. Some people have experienced it to a different degree than others. So I think that's where we're going to get a little bit of different view and depth. But let me just ask, who else would like to answer that and tell me what their definition of it is? Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
I have a more simplistic thought, is that it is when you, upon your initial experience with any particular person of any race, your first, thought of who that person is rooted in what color they are or what that person's character is. Like, if I walk in a room and, I know you, but if I didn't know you and you're the first person I see, and my first thought is, well, he's white, so he's probably, not going to like me, or he's going to be like this and going to be like that. And then I get to know you more. To me, that is a level of racism, whether it's negative and it's used against you or used in a negative way. I think people tie those two together too often and think, well, if I'm not being negative, then I'm not being racist, when you really can be a racist person and just not, be the kind of person where, I just don't like you because you're black.
Right.
If there's anything you think of me because I'm black, that's a level of it. So I think people have eliminated so many other levels and just see the negative use of it as the only problem when it really isn't.
Wow. Yeah. Irvin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think racism is so complicated yet so simple at the same time. It is when any individual or entity, it can be a company, it can be a police department, it can be the government, does anything intentionally or unintentionally to chip away at the sense of self-esteem of somebody or the feeling of self-worth based on their race. So often it doesn't have to be overt and it doesn't have to be intentional, even though it often is.
Wow. Wow.
I think good. For me, I think it's more ignorance of understanding. And I think of the fact of what racism is in the nutshell. It's when someone doesn't understand the things that they're doing or saying or what action they're taking. And if they do understand, they don't realize the ramifications that come from it. So I think when I think of racism, it's more to it than just a black or white thing, because as Karen said earlier, you can make an automatic, inference of someone and think something about them even before you know who they are. And that automatically starts out the process because of the fact that you've already had lack of ignorance, in that sense, because you really had no response and no way to make an informed decision of what was going on or who that person was. It's just an automatic of something that you don't even know. So sometimes I believe racism is deeper than just a black or white color. I think it's the fact that we're not, or the person who maybe is in that space, or whoever is in that place, they're not willing to take the time out to learn more about what that person is or isn't. So therefore, they automatically make an informed decision.
Wow. That, yeah, I mean, I think that when you look at racism from that standpoint, it's much broader than just a color of skin or a background. And I really appreciate that. That's a lot more depth to it. I appreciate that. Anybody else want to address that? I see a couple people that if you're on the panel, Bill, obviously you can open up your mic. Some of those people. Anybody else want to make a comment about racism?
I think Mike had his hand up there.
Yeah, I was raising my hand. I thought that was
there you
kind
go.
of you're being formal. So let me tell you something. I kind of had to think this through. And again, Bob, thank you for echoing how I feel, because as a white male, I feel like everything I say in this regard is almost condescending. It's just like, it just comes off the wrong way.
Right.
But what I think racism isn't, and is often mistaken for, I hear other white males often make the argument, why do we have an NAACP? Why can't we have a white organization? Why do we have a black student union? Why can't we have a white student union? And I really had to think this through, because your immediate thought is, wait, if you're pointing out that someone is African American or Hispanic, isn't that racist on its face? And here's what I kind of came to the conclusion of, and I'd love to hear maybe some comment about this. I don't think African Americans, Hispanic, transgender, whatever we want to address in terms of a group, are ashamed of who they are. We don't want to go through life saying, I don't see color. Of course I see color. I know what color you are. I don't think people are ashamed. I think they're proud of being African Americans, proud of being Latinos. But I think as when you're talking about racism, they just don't want to be treated differently or as lesser than. And that's what the definition of racism is. And I think it gets confused with this whole we can't see color thing.
Yeah. Wow. Well, but yeah, Wes, go ahead.
To echo everyone's point, I think that historically, at the baseline, people want to matter. No matter who you are, where you come from, you have a desire to matter, to feel significant, to feel important, to feel like your life is not a waste, that it means something. Right. And I think what racism is and does is a virus that seeps through humanity that says that other people's lives don't matter, that they're not significant, that they're not valued. And I think in a historical sense, there's often a minority. We sort of take it from the big picture of people want to matter, and then we make decisions that some people don't matter, and then we narrow it down to this country, and we narrow it down that there's been a sort of virus that seeped through that said these groups of people do not matter and are not worthy and not to be considered valuable. And the tendency is to think it's just a trend. It was just something back in the day when we had something like slavery. But to think that it pervades the society today, that there are still people who feel that a demographic of people don't matter as much, or are making a big deal out of nothing in their quest to want to matter, I think can confuse the conversation. So you have everybody yelling at everybody else, when really at the end of the day, everybody just wants to feel like we matter and we're acknowledged. And I think even the people that are exclaiming, I don't want to get into that part, the all lives matter, they're a little bit, and forgive me if I'm offending anybody, but they're a little tone deaf in terms of their ability to know what the people that are crying out to matter have been through for the last 400 years. Right. So they come not thinking of 400 years, they come thinking of this week on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and why are these people yelling this, and can we just say that everybody matters? Yeah. But that hasn't been the case throughout history, and it hasn't been the case in America for 400 years, and it's still not the case today. So while we've taken steps towards it, again, I think everybody really just wants to feel they matter, and they're equal in the mattering.
I'd like to add to that. I'd like to add to that if I could.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's well said. Yeah.
I think it's perfectly said. Something I read today, I can't take credit for this, but it exactly perfectly narrates what he just said. When it comes to Black Lives Matter, it says, we said Black Lives Matter. We never said only Black Lives Matter. We know all lives matter. We just need your help with the Black Lives Matter part. That pretty much sums it up. It's not really, I think, and just to go back to your question, racism, it's a learned behavior. We tend to be comfortable who we're comfortable around, who you're around, who surrounds you. If you're surrounded by your whole life with only white people and you walk into a room with all Black people, you might be uncomfortable for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And it's sad that it's that way. And it's, unfortunately, some people can't get past that. I think that, the NAACP and some of these groups, you say, why do we have to have that? Well, when you're only 13% of the whole entire population of the country, I want to be heard too, so you get marginalized into a small group and nobody wants to listen to you. So you have to come up with some kind of, outlet or a voice, and you make this voice for yourself. And I don't see it being a problem. I don't know why that's a problem for some people, but man, do you really have to say, white television? 90% of the shows on TV are white television. You don't have to label it. We can plainly see what it is. So for someone from a minority community, we look at it like, well, you know what, man? Hey, listen. Hey, at least I know what I could watch on TV if I want to see what's going on with us. I don't think it's a bad thing, and I don't think it's like to your point, it's not reverse racism. It's just, hey, man, we're only 13%. We'd like to see what we want a voice too. Everybody wants a voice. It's like I can't remember who said that, but we want a voice too. And I think we have a big enough stage to give us a little bit of room to get up there and say what we need to say. And unfortunately, a lot of this behavior is just passed on generationally after generation. Yes. It gets softer and it gets hidden through jargon and different terminologies, but the same hatred is still there. It's just said in a different way. And that's the way I see it. As if I'm just keeping it real with myself. That's people hide what they really feel in different terminologies. They call things different things and make it sound like it's not. Oh, that's not a racist thing to say. And when you look a little bit deeper than the surface, it really is. So, that's how I feel about it.
Rob, I appreciate that, Rob. And I'm just going to be really transparent here too, guys. I remember a couple of years ago when the Black Lives Matter thing came out. And I got to tell you, ignorance again, at that time I was like, but all lives matter. So why are they doing this? It only took me maybe a week for me to go, wait, what the hell was I thinking? They're not saying nobody else matters. They're just saying, and I'm like, wow, I felt so stupid. And I felt so ignorant at that point. And so, I'm glad that happened because I became much more aware about what I was actually even thinking. And I didn't even know why I was thinking it. So, but Wesley's really good about driving that point home. He's done several Facebook Lives recently about that very thing. So, yeah. Anybody else want to touch this? Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, so, I was just thinking about something. So I did a podcast this week with a team of ours, and we were doing civil rights movement. And one of the things that came up that it kind of brought some things to perspective. And the guy said to me, he goes, the reason why we're frustrated is because we always have to be the person who has to curtail who we are in depth, right? So he said he went on an elevator, and automatically in his mind there was him on the elevator, and a older white woman came on the elevator with him, and his natural reaction to himself was to say, "Hi, how you doing?" to put her at peace, so that she didn't feel that negativity towards being in an elevator with them. And then as the time went on and he started to think about it, he got mad because he felt like that was something that was automatically instilled in him to think about, that he had to make her feel comfortable so she didn't feel comfortable. And I thought when he said that, and I was listening to this conversation, that it really stood out because I started thinking of all the times as myself even, and someone who's in a lot of situations where I'm around of a lot of different, ethnicities, you do automatically go to that place where you're trying to make sure that you make that other person feel more comfortable. And I think the part where Black Lives Matter and where we're starting to talk about Black lives is the fact that we're frustrated in the sense of why do we always have to do differently instead of just being ourselves, right? And because we're not being able to be ourselves, we always have to come out and do something different to make it better for the other person and make them feel more comfortable. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration is right now, because as we were listening to this podcast and as I was doing a segment similar to what you're doing here, it dawned on me that even myself, like I didn't really think about that, but it's just something that's automatic. And that becomes part of the problem that keeps becoming perpetuated over time that makes it even worse.
Well, I mean, that's a profound statement and thought right there, because I don't think, again, as a white guy, I don't think I would have ever thought that a Black guy felt like he needed to come in and do something like that to fit in or to adjust. And how crappy is that anyone feels like they ever need to acquiesce? You guys are laughing. I must be really, really funny. But,
Well, that's because we all go through this. This is normal for us.
Wow. I just sit there and go,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just bring in something just because it's such a relevant point Corey made and that Erwin made. And I want to tie it into people who are listening who might not understand. I do a lot of speaking for women's groups and things like that about women. And one of the ways that when I started, I didn't know men don't know women. We think we do. We think they're just prettier versions of us, but they're not. They're completely different. And one of the moment that this opened up for me mentally is when I was sitting in an audience and the woman speaker asked the crowd of men, she said, "Men, I have a question for you. How many of you, when you walk in a dark parking lot at night, are scared for your life?" And no men raised their hand, or maybe one or two. And she said, "How many women, if you're walking alone in a dark parking lot at night, fear for your life?" And every woman's hand went up.
Yeah.
And it shocked me because I don't feel fear physically for my own safety. And I didn't realize to what degree women do. This is an area, and I bring this up because the way men don't understand how women feel in terms of a safety issue, because we don't have the same thing, is that white people or just people in general that have not been the subject of systemic oppression, we don't know what it's like to when we see a police officer, and again, I wish the police officer was here because I love my police and I support them and I donate financially and I love them, but we don't know what it's like to fear for our life. I worry I'm going to get a ticket, my insurance is going to go up. Like, that's the worst. Am I going to get pulled over? I'm going to get a ticket and they're going to, I don't even think that they're going to be mean to me or rude. They're just going to give me a ticket. My insurance is going to go up. We do not understand the fear that the African-American community, and correct me, please, anyone correct me if I'm wrong, feel in their DNA when they see someone of authority like that pursuing them or looking at them or whatever. We don't fear it because we don't have that in our systemic DNA, whereas they in their historical country, the DNA, have that. And that's where I think there's that, like Corey said, we just don't think about it. When I'm on an elevator with a woman, I don't think she's afraid of me. I don't even think it. So, but now I'm realizing like she could be petrified, especially if we get off on the same floor. She doesn't know who I am. I'm a man. I'm a predator to her. Whereas me, I don't ever think about it. So it's just really being empathetic to being in someone else's shoes and saying, what do they feel? And is it possible I don't know what that's like? And can I just listen and hear what people say? Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no.
I've seen Kasim's biceps. They would scare anybody, just so you guys know.
Hey, Wesley, you make a great point. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Wesley, you make a great point. So I coach high school football at a school in deep South Orange County. The school is $40,000 a year to go there. And we were just talking, I had a call yesterday with my players as well as their parents, and I was sharing my story. And I was talking about how, as a Black man, when you leave the house, right, I worry about making sure I come home, right? And people they had no fathom what I was talking about. So I had to give them kind of a macro level and then to a micro level of when I leave my house, right, I go through stages of the day. And at the end of the day, I got to make sure I do things the right way to get myself back home to my family, right? And so, for example, if I get stopped by the cops, my hands are at 10 and 2. Now, the kids that I coach, they don't have that conversation. They don't have this conversation, right?
Yes.
When I go to the ATM and there's a white lady up front, I stay in the car.
Stay back.
And I wait till she comes to her car, and then I get out, right?
Yeah.
I live about an hour or so plus away from where I coach at. So I have many families who gave me the keys to their homes and their condos to stay at. When I go to a condo that they lend me for a few days to stay down there, I get in the house real quick and I close the blinds up. Because if someone says there's a black man in the condo, I'm going to jail. There's no conversation that I'm going to have. But they're going to say, hey, maybe he's right. He's brought it for the night. It's still conversation. So for a black man who grew up in LA, where Nipsey Hussle got killed around the corner, right? So for me, right, my job is when I leave my house, whether I'm going to my company, whether I'm going to school, my job is to get back home. And I make sure I do things and I think 3 steps ahead to make sure I can get back home. And it's sad, but it's the commentary for most African-American men.
Wow.
So Corey, I'd like to add something to that. So I was a police officer for 4.5 years. I come from a very similar neighborhood as you. I grew up in the projects, and the first beating I ever had before I was jumped into any gang was by the police department. So I understand it and I get it. Luckily for me, I was able to escape my situation and go to the military, and that that really kind of got me out of the hood and into a different way of life. You know what I'm saying? So when I got out, my motivation for life at that point was to go and be an officer that was a good officer, because there was some good ones, but for the most part, they weren't. And I did become a police officer, and my first field training officer, and I'll never forget his name. His name was Lewis Johnson. He was on the police department for about 20 years, 25 years, black man. I got in the car with him, and I was thinking, in the military, I don't know if anybody's been in the military, there's really one of the only places that, for whatever reason, I just didn't really experience any racism there. Just everybody's kind of in the same bowl of crap, as we used to say, and we just kind of band together and figured out how to get out and do our time. It's like being in prison almost. But and I thought the police was going to be that same kind of esprit de corps brotherhood. It ain't. I got there, and I sat in the car, and Lewis was a tough FTO. He was not an easy guy to deal with. He wasn't a happy guy. Like, he was just pretty stern. And he looked over at me and he said, this is exactly what he said. He goes, I just want you to know, to the rest of them, I don't care how light-skinned you are, you're blacker than black can be on these streets. And I was like, what is that supposed to mean? He goes, they ain't gonna back you up. So we back each other up. We have an unwritten code, we back each other up. He said, so when one of us gets sent on a call with one of them, you can tell that other unit to disregard, and you gonna back us, and we gonna do it for you too, because we know that we can trust each other with each other's lives. He goes, because most of these, and not saying all of them, but a good majority of them ain't gonna have your back. And I was just like, wow, I couldn't even believe that. Being in the job for, a couple of years, or not even years, months, you could realize what Lewis told me was 1000% correct. When you walk into the precinct, there'll be a group of people standing there, and all of a sudden, when you walk in, all of a sudden everybody gets quiet. Like, man, what's up with that? What's the deal with that? We're supposed to be all out here, protecting each other, whatever. But and the whole moniker when I don't know if they're still doing this now, but it was all community policing. That was the whole, be part of the community. Irvin told me especially to talk about this tonight, because I've spoken to Irvin about this. I've never really talked about it that much, just because it was, it's been some years ago. I don't know if doesn't look like much has changed, but they tell us, be part of the community. Now, I was a police officer in the east end of Newport News, Virginia. I don't know if anybody knows that area, but it's rough. That's rough. If you think you've been in the hood, you ain't been in the hood. That's rough. I'm talking about it's a rough neighborhood. But, and I tell people this all the time, just, I'd say 95% of the people in them projects are good, hardworking people. They just ain't got a whole lot of money. It's the 5% of people that are going to cause ruckus no matter what you do, that's going to be the ones that act up and act crazy and mess up life for everybody else, essentially.
Right.
And it's a shame that people don't understand that you can't take someone that grew up in, and I use California as an example because I lived in LA for a long time. You can't take someone that's from like Irvine, bring them to Compton, and have them be a police officer and expect them to understand what is going on and what time it is, because they ain't gonna know. They're not. That's not part of their environment they're used to. So in my mind, it wasn't nothing new to be in the projects. I grew up in the projects. That's where I came from. I grew up with nothing. I understand that lifestyle. And when we have a murder or something, everybody's screaming and hollering, "You guys know who did it?" I'm like, man, these people got to live down here, bro. You can't. They live here. You get to go home at night. They live there. You start snitching. That's the end of your life, bro. You can't do that here. You guys got to chill out with these people. And it's a shame because, from being on the police side, you have to, like, at least for us, when I was there, I mean, our department was pretty, I'd say probably about 75% white, 25% black. There was a couple Latinos in there and stuff, but for the most part, it was a white department. So where I worked in the East End of Newport News is probably 99% black. It's 100, almost a 100% black neighborhood.
Right.
How do you expect someone that grew up in the county on a horse farm to understand? They ain't gonna understand, and they ain't gonna treat people right because they don't understand that lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? They don't understand that kind of, environment. They just don't get it.
Right.
And to me,
Rob, can I ask you a question? Because I think you're absolutely right. How can you expect them to understand that, right? They weren't raised that way. They don't understand. And so then when you look at, a white population, grew up in middle class or whatever, we don't understand. So when you got, when somebody says something about, being profiled, we're like, what are you talking about? And so, because we haven't been raised that way either. So we just don't understand. And I think that's where I've been coming around is like, I'm just like, we need more conversation so that we do understand, or at least have a better understanding.
Well, I will tell you this, the problem for me as an officer, and I'm not going to use the person's name, but I know a professional athlete that's from that area that I'm good friends with. He had a cousin there that was he wasn't a bad kid. He did like little, stupid stuff, might sell a bag of weed here and there, but nothing major. He wasn't a bad kid. He was just a kid that just needed a little bit of help. He didn't have no father. He didn't have a male role model in his life. So I mentored him. I liked the kid. So he asked me, he said, man, Mayor, why you didn't change up. You still talk the same way. You still do that. How'd you get out the hood? I said, well, for me, I went to the military. That's what I did. And I'm not saying that's going to work for you, but it worked for me. Right. He said, well, then recruiters won't come down here. I said, I'll come get you on my day off and bring you up there myself. If you want to do that, I'll help you. Yeah. So I did that. That in turn ended me getting brought into the lieutenant's office and told that I was under investigation for cohorting with known drug dealers. Wow. And I said, well, that's funny because you guys tell us to be part of the community. I'm trying to help this kid and mentor him. If we was on the other side of town, which was called Denby, which is the white side of town, you guys would be giving me a accommodation medal right now. But because it's a young black man in the ghetto, I'm getting investigated. How does that work out? You know what I'm saying? And then, it's on and on like that. And that's one of the reasons I left the police department, because I'm not a politician. I don't like politics. I just don't like that kind of stuff. And
so let me, has anyone else had a similar experience to that?
Hey, Bob, I'm going to jump in here because this is so interesting because we're talking about police relationships with black people in the ghetto, in these bad neighborhoods. Well, let me tell you about my experience in Dana Point, California, 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. It's a pretty nice neighborhood, Dana Point.
Yeah.
And I was driving home, driving in my nice Genesis company car after working, 13 hours, maybe 14 hours, as tired as can be, on my way home. And I was pulled over. And the very first question the police officer asked was I on parole or work release?
And
then he asked why I was there.
Right.
And I explained to him that I was going home. He asked me where my home was, and I said it's on my driver's license. I wasn't being a smart aleck. I just wanted him to have objective evidence. Well, he said, son, I didn't ask you what's in your driver's license. I asked you, where do you live? So I told him, and I told him how to get there. Obviously, he was trying to intimidate to get me to say something so he can do what he wanted to do, which was hurt me. And it went on. This has happened many times. I was pulled over.
Wait, is that what you really believed at that moment? That what
Absolutely,
he wanted to do was
100%, yes.
Yes. So scary.
And I say that because I have personal experiences of being yanked out of the car in Memphis, Tennessee myself, my older brother, who at the time was a captain or a major in the Army, thrown on the ground, handcuffed, cop stepped on my back. I was eating dirt because a black person, there was a report of a black person having committed a crime in this beautiful neighborhood called Germantown that my brother lived in. So what do? They grab every black person they can find, throw them outside, beat them up, and they search the car to see if they can find something. I've been pulled over in Irvine, right here in California, and where I live right now, and asked why I was in that neighborhood. And the bottom line is, almost every black male that I know has experienced that.
It happened to me 3 days ago.
The reality is, it's not about people not knowing how to deal with folks in the ghetto. It really is about race. It is 100% about race. It's about power and control, and accumulating and maintaining power and control, and doing whatever you can to hold somebody down. So I have no reason to make up stories, and you can ask any of these gentlemen. I guarantee you they've experienced the exact same thing.
So I've got a question for you guys, and I'm going to flip it both ways. How many people people who are black, what do you think? How many of them think what the percentage of police officers that are bad officers? Put it that way.
I personally don't think it's a lot.
Okay.
My hope, I don't think it's a lot. I have a lot of law enforcement friends.
Yeah.
When I was getting my degree is actually in criminal justice. My goal was to get my degree and then move on to the FBI. And then I ended up meeting Earl, and the job that I wanted, it was clearly stated by the FBI. It's not a job that's in someone that's married, because it's a profiler type job. So getting my degree, we worked a lot with San Diego PD. A lot of the captains and lieutenants taught some of the classes, so I got to know a lot of them. There are some there, but my hope is that it's not a lot. I don't see it being prevalent, but they're there.
Percentage-wise, Karen, what do you think is percentage?
I'd say maybe 5%, 5-10% maybe.
10.
And 10 is high.
What do you think the rest think?
10.
10?
It's 10.
I would probably say it's about somewhere below 5%, and I say that because I think that there's those bad apples that are cops, and then you have the people that are the receiving end, and you have the people in the middle, and it's the middle that's the problem, because they don't have a definitive stance towards racism, so they just allow it. So just much like how George Floyd was on the ground with a knee in his neck, and the other guy's just standing there. So he may not be racist, but that's his cop partner. So I'm just going to support my cop partner no matter what he does. And they don't have a strong enough conviction to say, you know what, this is bad. So it's the bad apples are few, but it's the ones that are lukewarm, that don't have a stance either way. Just allow it. So it looks like it's bigger than what it really is.
So the bad apples are only 5-10%, but you might have 40% that just don't have conviction strong enough.
40% that'll say that'll stick to their cop partner, because there's a code. Just like on a football team.
There it is.
Or siblings, you have a code. Like I'm not gonna let my guy down. It's my partner. I have to back him up no matter what. And they might reprimand them privately, but in the action of what's going on, they're gonna support their partner, because that's how they're trained to do that.
Bob, it's the same code. It's the same code, Bob, in the hood, right? You don't snitch, right? It's no different. Right?
Snitches get ditches.
Same code. It's the same code from the hood and the same code in the police department. At the end of the day, I'm going to ride with my fellow officers, and it is what it is.
That is in case it works like that a lot of times, but in the reverse on the police department, they will dip us in the grease as quick as they can to save their own. That's all there is to it. It don't matter about that blue line. I found out real quick that blue line means nothing unless you're the right color. And if you ain't the right color, you don't belong to the blue line, unless it benefits them, of course. And then And I'm not trying to be that negative about it, but I can only speak from my own experience on the police department. And I think that number is 10%, at least from my experience. It was 10%. And then
And
to your point, the other 30% that just sit back and don't say nothing and let things go down, that's the problem. That's to me the problem. That's more the problem than anything else.
That's why I left the Chargers. I didn't like it was a free agent year, and the way the general manager was speaking to other players, I know the conversation he had because I spoke to the players and I know how he spoke to them as opposed to how he spoke to me. And I just thought, you know what, I know my worth, and I'm just going to leave somewhere else because it's not worth it. And it was very hard to leave San Diego because I consider that my home.
Yeah.
And it was difficult, but it's just something that you go through. There's differences in pays. There's so many different aspects of the institutional racism that you can touch on that most people really don't know that exists. And they would say, oh, well, you know, you're a professional athlete, so what do you care? You're making a lot of money. Well, yeah, but it's still my body. I only get one of them. So if I'm going to go out there and damage my body, why is it that he gets more money than I do for doing the same job? If I'm not doing a better job than him, I'm still getting paid less. So there's instances where racism is there and people don't know that's you got to chalk that up to racism. It's something that has to be brought to light, which is something you're doing tonight, Bob, is that you're bringing to light and allowing people to voice their viewpoints, their stance, their experiences, and share it, because sometimes people just don't know. And you have a lot of people in the African-American community who they're just taught to deal, to endure, just to put up with it and just, you know, turn the other cheek and keep going, press on. It's not going to go away. So just deal with it. And we deal with it by not talking about it. And that's how somebody like you, Bob, who has a lot of friends from different backgrounds, cannot know about it, because I think that you attract those type of people who are just strong-willed, strong people that just survive, that don't really complain. So I've never complained to you about experiences I've had, because you're the kind of person that when I'm around you, I just want to have fun. I want to talk. I want to live. I want to love. I want to be happy. And I want to experience that togetherness, because when I'm around you, I don't see white Bob. I see Bob, my brother. Yeah. And it's something that if we could get the community to start to see and appreciate, to understand and feel that, it's got to go deeper on that level. It's got to, we in the African American community have to start voicing that and saying, look, enough is enough. This is what I'm going through. I need your help.
Yeah. Because there's so many lukewarm people, not just in the police department, but just in your life. You know, Bob, you're talking about you get tongue tied as to what to say. It's not so much what to say, it's say something. So when you, either someone in your life or in your circle or whatever is doing something that's not right, say something. You know, that's all we're asking is to
my
be present. Yeah.
I hear the opposite. I hear somebody say, you know, oh, who does he think he is? You know, he doesn't understand my plight. He doesn't understand my. So then it just causes me and probably some of my friends to go, okay, then I shouldn't say anything, because if I say something, I'm going to get slapped or, you know, whatever, ridiculed. And so, but I like what you're saying, Karen and Kasim, thank you for that, because I think we need to say something. We need to have conversation. And that's why for a week I've been going, well, what should I do? And I'm like, you know, I just got to get some people together and have that conversation.
Just don't say what Drew Brees said.
What's that?
Just don't say what Drew Brees said.
Yeah.
He was my quarterback, man. I love the guy. He's a great guy. But he just,
that was not his finest moment.
apologize.
I'm glad
Bob,
he came back
Bob,
and apologized.
I do want to, I mean, a lot of us are sitting here saying what we think, if it's 5% or 10%, and there have been so much research done on this topic. And it's not about people who are KKK, you know, I hate those people. Yeah, okay, that might be 5% or 10%. The reality is there's a lot of data that says that you can pick the topic when they take major, I read Malcolm Gladwell, my favorite author, his latest book, Talking with Strangers. You should read the book, okay? And they take a paper that's written by a person who's going to join a law firm, and they show it to half of the law firm, and they ask them to read it, evaluate the person, and say how good they'd be. And on with one group, they put a picture of a black person. Another group, they put a picture of the white person. There were like twice the number of errors found in the same piece of paper when they knew it was a black person than when they thought it was a white person. They were much less likely to think the same person, exact same words, no difference, if it was a black person than a white person. So the reality is there's a deep racist mentality that allows people to think less of somebody because they're black. So go back to the police officers. I'm not saying they're sitting in a room saying, hey, let's go kill a bunch of black people today. But the reality is, if they arrest somebody, they're much more likely to think that you did something wrong if you're black than if you're white. If you speak up and ask, why are you arresting me? They're much more likely to think that you're being aggressive and to fear for their lives than if you're white. And as a result, they take action. The difference is when the police takes action, you're dead. If I put my house on the market, you know what we do? And the black people know this, you take all your family pictures down.
Yes.
Because white people will not buy a house if they thought a black family lived there. These are things that we have to think about. So don't let them know that black people live here. Take the pictures down, hide that stuff, right? So if you sell something on the internet, don't have your fingers showing. So these are reality. This is what we do. And this is what we have to get to. It's really, really deep. It's not about, you can't look at racism as, oh, I really hate those white people, or I really hate those black people. I do agree that's a very small number. But the people who have some innate suspicion of something less, I think it's a much bigger number. I think it's more than 50%.
I do too. Yeah, I have to agree with that. And on those same lines, you know, people who put their picture on their resume, a black person will not do that. I mean, I luckily, unluckily, or whatever, my skin tone is light enough that, and you guys will understand what I mean by I can pass. I've had that, you know, opportunity to not get profiled because I'm lighter than all my friends that I happen to be with, and we're in a store and the clerks are looking at us like, what are you guys doing? They didn't look at me, but we're all together. So, you know, it's that whole, it's always playing in the back of your head, but it's also always playing in the back of their heads. It's a different dialogue. And those dialogues crash into each other quite often.
So when you think if you're racist, you shouldn't just think of, do I hate black people? No, you should think, do I test myself to see if I think differently of people? Am I less likely to hire that young kid who doesn't really have all the experience if he's black than if he's white? No, because if you're white, you see yourself in that kid. You were pretty ambitious, you'll grow, right? So the white kids get promoted or hired because they have potential. The black kids have to prove that they're capable and that they've done it already. It's the same with women. The women know what I'm talking about. This
you have to work twice as hard.
So you really have to get through it. I'm done.
You know, I was gonna say also, you know, it's funny, everything that Karen and both Erwin said are so spot on in that regards, because I mean, even 20 years ago when I was thinking about raising my two kids, my two boys, I made sure that they had names that could pass in any demographic, period. There was no, you know, name that went out. They were Chase and Chance, period, okay? And that gave them one step up that whenever they saw an application, whenever they went in for an interview, they would have an opportunity to at least get in the door. And that is so true to so many Africans. We go out there and again, try to figure out a way to just even get on an even footing from that standpoint.
Exactly. I spent weeks trying to decide on my twins' names before. I mean, it was an obsession almost for that exact reason. I refused to name them. It's going to sound bad, so excuse me, but traditional ethnic hood names. You don't see a Shaniqua as a CEO of a company. That was my mentality. And I'm like, I can't. I just need to name them something that will, you know, it may not give them a head start, but at least it won't, you know, put them to the bottom of the pile.
So let me ask you this. I mean, I can see a huge problem right there with all the stuff we've just talked about. What's the solution? And I before we do that, I want you guys to think about some solutions that, how could we handle this differently on both sides? And then I want to ask George here, because being an attorney general, how stacked is the deck against minorities in the judicial system?
Geez, well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a pleasure to try to contribute something to this dialogue over a very critical issue facing our country. The original question that you asked, before I answer your question about the judicial system, the original question that you asked about what is the definition of racism, I think is a very important question. because as you can see from the answers, we had a bunch of different answers. There wasn't just one answer, right? When I grew up, racism had a very fixed definition. The definition was essentially, if I look at someone and I judge them to be inferior to me, simply on the basis of the color of their skin, then I'm a racist. That was the definition, the historical definition, the traditional definition of racism that I grew up with. I think there's a lot of confusion in the country right now about what that term means, because as we've seen from the answers here, everyone seems to have a slightly different take on it. I'd love to see the New York Times do a big full-page spread with all these different definitions that people have of racism, because it's not one thing. It's not one thing to all people. It means, you know, slightly different things to different people. So, and the problem with that is that it's a very hateful act, and it's a very damaging term. You know, when you apply that term to someone, it's a very damaging term. And so no one wants to hear that term and to the extent, or be labeled with that term. And so to the extent that that term is thrown around too loosely, it does a number of things. It creates a lot of a breakdown in communication, because people don't really know what it means anymore. They think it's a moving target. And one of the things that I think we can't escape with regard to this issue is certain fundamentals about communication, right? No matter what the issue is that we're talking about, whether we're talking about racism, or whether we're talking about guns, or whether we're talking about global warming, or whatever we happen to be talking about, communication, there are certain, you know, fundamental tenets of communication that lead to either effective communication that resolves problems, or ineffective communication that leads to riots, right? So what is a riot? A riot is a form of communication. It's a form of communication when all other forms of communications break down, right? So when people feel they can't get their point across through a calm dialogue, then they raise their voice, or they become physical, or they, you know, it goes up and it gets elevated, and it escalates to the point where, you know, when the frustration builds from your being unable to communicate your message, eventually, if the message is important enough, like people dying in the streets, you burn down buildings, right? So part of what we have to deal with here, I think, is the issue of how do we communicate these issues more effectively. And one of the ways to do that is to begin with having a better understanding of what this term means, and a better kind of consensus around what this term means. And if we need to revise the definition of the term from what it was historically to something different, or if we need to come up with a new terminology to describe what it is that is offensive and inappropriate without calling it racism, right, you know, maybe that's an option as well. But communication is fundamental here. That's one thing. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to point out was the point made about the essay from the two lawyers, the one being black and the one not being black, and the way that was critically critiqued. Bias, there's a concept called bias, and it's different than racism, right? Bias can be in many, many forms. Bias works on an unconscious level. You're not even aware, you know, the people that are grading those two papers differently, if you ask them, are they racist or are they prejudiced? They would tell you no, and they would honestly believe it because they are not consciously being racist. They are unconsciously being racist. They are unconsciously, their unconscious bias is coming through, right? And bias is a human it's a human characteristic. I wouldn't call it a human quality because it's, you know, it's kind of damaging in many respects, but we all have biases, and they come through unconsciously. So understanding how our brains work, you know, a lot of the African American community, I'm sure, you know, is very frustrated, obviously, right, by what's going on. And part of understanding what's going on is understanding how the human brain works and how some of these, you know, cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, motivated reasoning, all of these things come into play in all of the issues that we deal with. And some of that is impacting this issue as it does in all other issues, okay? You know, Bob, you asked me about the criminal justice system. What was the question exactly?
How stacked is the deck against minorities?
Well, you know, it's they're clearly, first of all, I don't know. I don't know that any of us know.
Okay.
But there are clearly disparity in treatment at every level of our judicial system, from policing to sentencing recommendations to what prisons people are sent to, what the length of their sentence is, how different people are treated differently for different crimes. I did a Zoom on this yesterday, 2-hour Zoom on this yesterday on the same subject. And I had a guy named Dominic Gentile, who is a criminal defense lawyer, one of the best criminal defense lawyers in the country. And he's dealt with this a lot more than I have. It probably would have been a great question for him. But essentially, there is systemic disparity in treatment throughout our judicial system, I believe. And it manifests itself at all levels. You know, a black man in America has a 1 out of 3 chance. 1 out of 3 black men in America will go to prison in his lifetime, which is a horrific statistic. 1 out of 2 black men will be arrested by the time they're 23 years old. One out of 2 by the time they're 23 years old. Now, you know, you might think that the number of white men that are arrested by the time they're 23 would be much, much lower. But actually, that's 40%. Today, 40% of young white men are arrested by the time they're 23 years old. So there's a problem. There's a problem that's going on between our youth and between our institutions of authority. We're seeing it not only in the way they interact with their parents, many of which are from broken families. Yeah. We see it in the way that they interact with their teachers, and this is black and white. This is youth versus authority. We see it in the way that they interact with their teachers, with the way that they interact with their employers, and in the way that they interact with the police. And in interacting with the police, the difference between the police and everyone else is that the police carry guns. And you know, the other thing is that although most police in highly populated urban areas have a college education, 70% of police across the country do not have a college education. And so you have young people who have this increasing disrespect for many institutions. 40% of millennials do not believe in capitalism. 40% of millennials are not politically affiliated. They don't believe in the Republican or the Democratic Party. These institutions of authority have lost their credibility with the younger generations. And because the younger generations look at the situation that they look at the country that we are leaving them, and they see mounting challenges. They see student debt at 1.5 trillion. which exceeds all credit card debt, which is unbelievable, right? They see that, you know, people in their family that don't have a job can't afford to go to the hospital. They don't have healthcare insurance. And you know, and if they go to the hospital, they can't pay for it.
Right.
So we have all these systemic problems throughout society that young people are growing increasingly dissatisfied. Not everybody that's out there marching and burning down buildings is doing it simply, only because of George Floyd. Many of them are doing it because they are fed up. They're fed up with the country that they're living in. Yeah. They're fed up with their government, right? And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of problems that are very deep and systemic in the way that our society has managed itself over decades, if not centuries.
So we're not going to be able to change that overnight, right? I mean, this is going to be a process.
Yeah.
But from a human behavior, from a humanistic standpoint, what are some of the things that we should be mindful of, and what kind of actions can we take to have a better understanding? I think everything comes down to understanding. If we understand things, we can behave differently. If we don't understand things, we're always going to be taking shots in the dark to see if we hit something.
Let me give you just a list of action items,
okay,
that I think are important for addressing this particular problem.
Okay.
And again, I'm not a black man, right? I haven't lived the experience. So my knowledge and my perspective is limited, right? Which is why it's very important to have these types of discussions, because you need input,
right,
from all interested parties, and especially the African American community. But what I think, are some of the things that we need to do is we need to have increased sensitivity training and conflict diffusion training on the part of our police forces. So we need to have improved training in these areas. We need to give our police officers other tools besides a lethal weapon to diffuse tension, right? So whether that's a stun gun or whether it's something that's non-lethal, every police officer should be carrying something that is non-lethal, that would allow them to, potentially escalate the interaction in a non-lethal manner. I think we need psychological testing of our police officers to try to identify serious biases and evidence of racism, so that they don't become employed and never get on the force. And frankly, I think that testing should be annual. I think that testing should be annual, because not only do we need to screen these people when they come in, but the job that they do puts them in very stressful situations, puts them in encounters with people who are throwing water on them, who are spitting on them, who are insulting them. And if that happens for an extended period of time,
it changes them.
I'm sorry?
It changes them.
Yeah, exactly. It can absolutely change them. And so we need to know, not all people are as resilient to those types of forces, and some people's attitudes and behaviors can change very markedly from that kind of interaction over a prolonged period, right? So a cop that's been dealing with this for 10 years, may have become a racist, right?
Right.
So that's another issue. Opening up improved communication between police and communities and stakeholders, I think, is important. Reducing crime within urban areas through a joint community police effort, because one of the things that we have to do, we have to understand that crime is breeding in these tinder boxes of discontent that America has created really for centuries, right? We have marginalized and moved the African American community into neighborhoods that are separate from our own. And we've done a number of things. We've discouraged them moving into white neighborhoods. by white people that display a disinterest in having them as a neighbor. We have banks that redline some of these zip codes and will not invest in these zip codes. And so that reduces economic investment, that continues to make these communities less viable. It creates greater unemployment. If you have greater unemployment, you have increased crime, you have increased drug use, you have a deterioration of the family, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So part of the solution is definitely we have to restore and revive these communities. We need to think about hiring police that are more reflective of the communities that they serve in. So for example, if Ferguson is 80% African American, you probably don't want 100% white police force trying to manage a population that's 80% African American, right? There should be a much higher number of Black officers, I believe, in communities that are predominantly African American. We need police accountability boards, right, that are separate, that are completely separate and distinct from the departments that they serve in and from the prosecutors that they work with, right, and the district attorneys. So the people that are judging their behavior should be people that are completely outside of not only the force that they work with, but the other institutions that force interacts with on a regular basis. None of those groups should be the groups that are analyzing and passing judgment on the activities of these police force. They should have some form of representation, but it should not be a majority of representation. It should be a minority of representation. You should have like an outside board of directors. You want an outside group looking over this. I think that we need to increase empathy for all stakeholders, right? So we need training in empathy. And I think that goes, for everyone. We need increased empathy for police. I think that, police are an essential part of our society. Lawlessness leads to anarchy, and without a rule of law and without a police force, you don't have a civilized society. And so we need this. And we need to encourage better people, not worse people, but better people to want to join the police force, right? Well, you're not going to get, who would want to be a cop today, right? I wouldn't want to be a cop today, right? I wouldn't want to be spit on and have things thrown on me and have society, think ill of me. So, if you want to have better police, it has to be an honorable profession, and respect. To create that level of respect, respect has to be earned. So of course, the police have to improve their performance so that they are respected. But ultimately, I think society needs to understand that we aren't going to get anywhere without police, and we aren't going to get anywhere by continuing to denigrate police. Just like we're not going to, empower the millennial generation by denigrating them and calling them delusional and entitled, and that's not going to help them, right? So we need to support the people that we want to excel. I think that we need to think about creating zones. We can pass laws that create zones for economic investment. We're doing some of that around the country. I think we need to do more of that. I think we need to incentivize investment in these communities. I think we need zoning changes. I think we have far too many bars and liquor stores on every corner in some of these communities. That shouldn't be allowed. I think we need community centers where people like the people that are on this panel can mentor. So facilities for these young people to come off the streets in those communities.
So let me just ask right there, because I think you hit on so many great points along that way. I want to get some feedback on the rest of the people on this panel. What are some of the things that really stood out to you that you thought I could get behind that, and yes, that would be one of the key things we need to do?
Bob, I've got one more that I want to add to the list that I think is maybe one of the most important. And that's, the children that are involved in these encounters there needs to be a re-education of these children where we instill greater respect for all forms of authority, their parents, their teachers, their employers, and the police. We need to elevate the level of respect for authority, for all forms of authority. And so that would just, you know, that's mainly my list.
I think that's a good one too. What's
Bob,
one that really stood out
it's
to you?
taken everything in me to remain professional in this response. With all due respect, Mr. Attorney General, I fundamentally disagree with almost everything you just said. I will not attempt to argue the law with you. I'm not a lawyer, just like you would not attempt to argue math or engineering with me because you're not an engineer. The bottom line is, for an attorney general to sit there and say that bias, if there was bias against my mother when she went to the hospital to have me as a child, and bias against me when I went to preschool, and bias against me every year of high school, and bias against me getting into college, and bias against me through college, bias against me getting a job, bias against me getting every promotion. I, unfortunately, maybe I don't look like the Black people that you're used to because I don't live in the ghetto. I'm not one of those, and none of my friends or family members are. But all of us are discriminated against, and all of us the police attempt to intimidate us all of the time. The reality is that white people live in a world, I wish I had a white switch that I could hit and I could suddenly not have to deal with the things that I deal with. That switch doesn't exist. When I get pulled over by a cop, I have an app on my phone so I can record the conversation so I can use it in court, where I know the police have virtual, it's called qualified immunity. I mean, they can do whatever they want and get off with it. These are the laws that have to change. We have to change the laws that give police officers qualified immunity. We have to have oversight of the police department. We cannot sit still and allow these biases that affect people over and over and to say that, hey, because I didn't intentionally mean to discriminate against you because you were Black, then that's not racism. I think there's a fundamental problem with racism in this country when the leaders in this country believe that it has to be active and intentional in order for it to be real. And I wish that you could live in our shoes for one day.
I don't think that it has to be active or intentional. And I think that the racism that's inflicted upon you and other professional African-American men is hideous and completely unacceptable. The idea that you've done everything in your life to be a productive member of society and to live a good and just life, and that you would be treated any differently than anyone else is morally abhorrent and completely unacceptable. I don't know why you would think that my statements are in any way inconsistent with that. You know, I don't disagree with your position at all.
Can I say
I'd like
something?
to say
Sorry.
I think one of the statements that might have been that Reverend might be referring to is the initial question was, what do you think that the Black community or the minority community is treated differently from the judicial system that we all have to abide by? And the absolute answer to that is all you got to do is look at the sentencing for the same crimes. Those statistics are available. The minority community, Black, Hispanic community is given far harsher sentences, far longer sentences for the same exact crimes, and nobody says anything about it. So the answer to that question is absolutely yes. 1000%, there is a difference. Absolutely yes, we're incarcerated at higher amounts. If you look at the prison population and then dissect it all the way down to each crime and find out what each person went, if you don't have the money to afford these special lawyers and great lawyers that can come in and get you off, then you're going to jail and nobody cares. So yeah, the long answer is one. The shorter answer is 100% yes. You are going to get a harsher sentence if you are from the hood and you are of a Black or brown Black background. That's just all there is to it. And anybody else on here that is Black or brown can definitely attest that. I worked in Irvine too, and every single time I go to my office, and I worked at a major car company, I got pulled over every single time because I had a brand new demonstrator car. I just got pulled over last week here in Tampa, Florida, where I live, and pulled out of my car at gunpoint by someone that I thought was going to kill me. I really thought he was going to kill me because I have a concealed weapons permit that comes up on my license. So when he pulled me over, I'd let him know as a courtesy, hey man, just want to let you know I got a gun in the car. And he freaked out. I had my hands up like this when I told him. So until the other cops got there and I explained to them that I was prior law enforcement, he was shaking like a leaf on a tree. I thought he was gonna kill me. I told Irvin about this last week. I was really scared that he was gonna shoot. So this is not a what if scenario. This is an absolutely happening all the time scenario. This happens every day. So, and especially not just corporate America. I was told when I got promoted to run the country for a major car brand that I needed to go to executive training class because the way I speak was not to their liking. So,
can I jump in here real quick, Bob? First of all, I want to say thank you for doing this. The differences and the thoughts, and I didn't actually see a lot of differences, but I saw things that were sort of eye-opening for me as well. I think there's macro answers going on here and there's micro answers going on here. And so it's like in a marriage, or sometimes I'll coach a couple and the woman will say, the wife will say, you gave me a car with no gas in it, and I'm driving around late at night and you didn't fill up knowing I was going to do that. And he goes, fine, you want me to fill up the car with gas? I'll do it every Wednesday. Are you happy now? And the micro answer is what the husband thinks is the answer, and it's really the macro answer that she's looking for, which is, honey, I'm so sorry. You're right. That was insensitive of me to put you out on the street, not thinking through this issue. It won't happen again, and thank you for letting me know that. Now, that's easier said than done in relationships, but it's a goal to something to sometimes strive for. I think in this conversation, one of the things, being a church history major to some degree, one of the big challenges in church history, I'm not Catholic and I'm not Jewish, but one of the big issues in church history is between Catholics and Jews is that the Catholics were silent during the Holocaust, and they stood back and they came up with things later. And what the Jews wanted was an apology. They wanted an apology from Rome to say, listen, not just an individual pope's apology, or not just an individual micro plan to make things better so we're not discriminated against. They wanted the church to issue an edict saying, we were wrong to remain silent while you were getting slaughtered, and we apologize. Do you accept our apology? And I think one of the things that's missing in this dialogue, from, unless it's happened and I missed it, is that if there was a way going forward for, like, George, a lot of George's ideas, I thought, Erwin, I thought were good, but they start today. They don't include 400 years of oppression. They're just small changes that could be instituted in training of police officers. But I think what I'm wanting to hear for my brothers and sisters of color is an apology, a systemic apology, to say, you know what, we have historically abused you, discriminated against you, treated you poorly, and for that we apologize to the African American community. I don't know if there's been a systemic acknowledgement of what has been years and years of racism and abuse and mistreatment and profiling. I don't know if an apology has ever been issued on the macro scale. And I think a lot of people just want to be acknowledged that my reality, what Erwin was saying, being pulled out of the car, what Rob was saying, or Karen, or any of them were saying, is that this was a reality for me and no one's acknowledged it. It's been relegated to, oh, those were a few bad apples. Oh, it was just a one-off incident. George Floyd was a one-off. Not everybody's a bad apple type of thing. And as Chris Rock says, some jobs can't have bad apples to that degree. It can't be, you can't say to your pilots when you're going to get on Delta Airlines, you know what, most of our pilots like to land. We just have some bad apples that like to crash in the mountains. You can't always have that. So I think one of the additions to George's point that I'd like to add, and thank you, George, for that, I would like to add is, to start that conversation, is a huge apology to the African American community and an acknowledgement of their claims that they've been discriminated, abused, mistreated, disenfranchised, and the subsequent economic ramifications, criminal elements, all that can be a result of that. And I think starting with an apology of not just an individual, again, a nation, a national apology, will acknowledge him and say, you know what, I'm not crazy. I'm not just reading racism into everything. There is a legitimate claim here. Thank you for acknowledging it. Now let's start a conversation of what we can do going forward.
I think that's an excellent idea.
My personal idea, I think, my personal opinion, redlining is the #1 issue, because home is where the heart is. That's where it all starts. George touched on it. The youth have lost their respect for the authority. Authority at home, man can't get a job because he's in a place where they're not able to survive. It's all, the redlining allows for all the lower incomes to be piled in one place. There's no banks investing in that community. Those kids don't get the proper property tax that goes to the education, so their education is not as good because the teachers don't get enough pay, there's not enough resources, and the school is dilapidated. So if the kids are not getting the proper education, they're not going to be able to be productive citizens in society, so which in turn puts them on the negative path. So you have to remove redlining in order to start it, because that's where it all starts. That's where it all begins, and that's where all the systemic racism started was in redlining. Wow. So I think that's the #1 issue.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with him. You know, from a financial background and what I deal with every day, he's spot on. You know, we don't necessarily need you to give us a handout. You know, we need to get a hand up, and we just need to be able to get started to where we can have an equal playing field when it comes to the financial affairs of our lives. If we can't afford, or excuse me, we can't go out and buy the things that we need in order to grow our community and be able to get to the point where we can start purchasing our homes and having families that can be built around that process, that's what we die off at. So you wonder why they're out there, you know, looting and trying to find it, because they're struggling. These people don't have the ways to make ends meet. You know, he hit it right on the button. You know, I send my kids to a white neighborhood to get a better education instead of being at a school that's right around the corner from us, because they don't have the books and the resources and teach about finance and money. And that's the reason why. It wasn't until I went to school to learn about finance and money that I ever even heard about what a mutual fund was or a stock was or anything along that line. And that's where it starts from. If we can't get the same education or the same insight and understanding when it comes to dealing with money, how can we ever feel that we're going to ever get to the same level as you are if that doesn't happen? And it all starts with, like he just said, if I can't buy a community that pays taxes to the school district that's in the area, and then gives my kids the better opportunity to get better education from that, then at that point in time, it just starts the perpetual problem all over again. Spot on, kids.
They should do away with property tax, I think. It should be government funded for all schools equally across the board.
Wow. You guys, you know, I just want to commend you. This is what it's about. It's about the ability to discuss in open forum and disagree and agree and come back and disagree some more. And because if nothing's going to get solved in one night, and nothing's going to get solved, no one's mind is just going to automatically be opened and changed. But what I'm liking and what I'm really hearing from you guys is your willingness to say, I'll give this and I want to receive this. I understand this, but I don't understand this. And I just want to really tell you how much I appreciate all of you for doing that. And I know we're already running out of time, but here's what I want to close off with, because you know, I want people to have a chance. I mean, we've got 100 people on this call, and I know a lot of them want to ask questions, but obviously we're running over. But here's what I want to ask as a final thought. What's one thing that we can do today to be better for you as a community, because I mean, look, I just want to know, how can I be a better friend, a better brother, a better citizen for you? And I agree with Wes on that apology thing. And so, you know, I'm just gonna say, you know, for every ignorant thing that I've ever said and not understood about what racism or what you've had to deal with, please just understand that I apologize. I can't imagine what you've had to deal with growing up or being fully grown. And for that, for not understanding that at age 57, I've done a huge injustice. And I'm grateful that that each of you have played a pivotal role in my life, and that you have been tolerant of my lack of understanding and maybe even my lack of desire to understand. So for that, I want to say thank you as well. That was not planned, but
we love you, Bob, man. It's all good, brother.
and not planned, but appreciated. We love you.
I don't think a man can be condemned for something he doesn't know. And the fact that you're willing to try to figure out shows the kind of person you are. You're a consistent character. You've always been. And I wouldn't beat yourself up over that, because if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
But the fact that somebody's coming to tell you and you're willing to listen, that's all anybody in the African community wanted to have, was for somebody to say, you know what, here's my ear. I love you. Talk to me. What do we do? I'm here to help.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. I appreciate each one of you. And so that being said, what can we do moving forward to be better human beings to one another? And how can we, what can we do to learn? I mean, is there, and I know this is just a trite thing, but I'm just saying as an example, is there something that we could experience or read or do that would help us understand greater? And obviously dialogue is one of those things, but what can we do to be better for each other?
I think the best thing to do is to contact the senator that represents your district or your area, or your state, where you're at. Contact them and ask for them to demonstrate what their platform is and what their plan of action is. Because a lot of us elect people and then they go silent, and then there's a disconnect. There's no connection between representation and the represented. So I think reestablishing a connection with people in government offices to let them know it's not going to fly anymore. We're here, and we need accountability. We need to know what you're doing, what you're planning to do, what your actions are, and if not, we're not voting for you next year. That's pretty straightforward, and I think it's the best way to get started is to call them and say, I'm not going away. I'm going to call every month asking for updates on what your plan is. I need to know what we're going to do about this, because the inaction is allowing cancer to grow in our country. So we need to start putting the vaccine to it.
Hey, Bob, I also agree with you in saying that, but I think it also has to come at a very individual lower level. So it's your state senator, but it's also the assemblyman, you know, the city council. It's at the lower level. I think, unfortunately, when I was talking about that podcast, one thing I said is I don't believe that we have great leaders. We don't have orators who go out there and inspire a world or a nation. And I think that's what we're missing. We have to find a way to communicate on the lower level of the city, the communities that are around us, in order to know how to start lifting ourselves up. And it all is going to start somewhere by finding someone who can inspire us to do more. Right now, the reason why we have such bad outcomes on the voting is because people don't believe it's going to make a bit of a difference. But if we get to the lower level and we start to build and start to talk to our assemblymen and our councilmen and councilwomen, that gives us the ability to start having a voice heard, and maybe we make some effective change at a lower level, then it also starts to build over time. But until that happens, we're going to keep having the same issues that are going on, because we have to figure out a way to make there some kind of equality when it comes to financial areas. In order for us to make a difference, we better sustain ourselves.
Right. Wow.
And I agree on both of those points. We really need to be involved with our leaders and vote, for God's sake, vote deeper and think more about it than what is played on TV and those ads. I mean, I've taught my kids when they were growing up, we pull out the voter pamphlet and we literally would read all of the propositions, the legal language of it.
Mhm.
But on another scale, I think one of the biggest things we can do as both African American community and everyone else is to remember that these kids that are coming up need mentors. There are so many kids out there that have nobody to look up to, nobody to model for them. Myself and my broker, Sean Sorensen, are involved with the Big Brothers Big Sisters,
Yeah.
whose main goal is to match these kids, these at-risk kids, with mentors that gives them a model of how to move forward successfully. And it's a wonderful opportunity to put yourself out there and be and see change. You're making it happen, and you see it. You see the result. You see the kids change. You see the community change. Just, if nothing else, just do that. At least try to do that, or try to touch the lives of youth in your area one way or another. If you want information, call me, get in touch with me. I can put you in contact with Big Brothers Big Sisters. But that is a huge way to make a direct, immediate impact.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
I agree with everything everybody said. I'm going to add maybe a different dimension. I think, Bob, you started this conversation with a statement. You said that conversation matters. And I think that is so important, that we have to talk, and not just talk. We have to listen. We have to hear each other. We have to really communicate with each other. And I'm going to speak now to the white folks. Don't say you don't see color. Please don't. Because when you say you don't see color, what we hear is, I'm not willing to acknowledge what I see when I see color. Okay? That's what we hear. That's might not be what you mean, but I want you to hear. It's about communication. I want you to hear what the audience hears.
Yeah.
Don't say all lives matter. We all know that white lives matter. There's never been a dispute.
Never been a question.
We are not sure that everybody understood that Black lives also matter. And so for us, it's important that we understand that you reflect that by letting us know that we matter. And don't overdo this. It's not as if we just talk to folks. I bet you every Black person on this panel has had white people over to their home for dinner or for drinks in the last 2 months. And I won't embarrass you, but if you think about it, have you had Black people come into your home? The reality is, it's not that you hate Black people, it's that we don't know each other. We have to live double lives. We have to live a life at home, and then we have to live another life when we go to the office. But we should get to know each other more,
right.
And have open conversation. And Attorney General Chanos, I really want to commend you for coming on here tonight, because the bottom line is, you came in, you spoke, you shared with us. I want you to know I heard you. I hope you heard us. And I think we have to have a lot more conversation. And I promise you, when I come into your town, I'm going to give you a call, and we're going to get coffee together.
Good.
Thank you.
I have a little different take on what I think we need to do. Erwin, I want you to know that I hear your pain, and I hear the voices of other men like yourself, and I truly do believe that it is one of the great tragedies of this country and the world, that any group of people or any human being would be made to feel in any way less than anyone else.
Yeah.
At any level, in any matter. So I hear you. I hear your pain. I hear your frustration, and it's legitimate. But I'm a problem solver. I'm not a priest. I'm not a psychologist. And I may not have I may not approach things that way. I approach things more pragmatically, in terms of, I'm really looking for a solution. I'm looking to solve the problem. I'm looking to have less young men die, right? That's what I'm interested in. I want less young men to die. Okay, so how do we get there, right? And I believe that that's a multidimensional solution. I do believe that you know, all of the suggestions that have been made tonight are good and useful. I have a little different take on government and how much we can rely on government. I'm not a big fan. Having served in government, having been in government, I've seen it firsthand, and I know its limitations and its inadequacies, and they're as alarming to me as anything else. You know, Alvin Toffler, futurist Alvin Toffler, said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. It will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? I think that we all have a lot of learning to do.
Yeah.
I think we all have a lot of unlearning to do. And I think we all have a lot of relearning to do. And I think that if you want to learn something, one of the most important things is an open mind. You know, when I first met Bob Donnell at the first dinner that we attended, he told me about this group that he had. And he said that the only condition to the group was that you had to come with an open mind. And I thought, that's a group I want to go to. And that's how we met. And that's how we began a dialogue and a friendship, because I believe very deeply in the need for an open mind. You know, Frank Zappa once said that a mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it isn't open. And so I would ask everyone to have an open mind, embrace conversation, embrace learning, embrace unlearning, and embrace relearning. And don't rely on government, because, you know, it's great to contact, you know, your senators and your congressmen and do that. Please do that. Those are good suggestions. But don't sit at home by the phone waiting for them to call you back or to take action. The change that is going to occur, if it's going to occur, is going to come from us. It's going to come from each one of us. It's going to come from mentors. It's going to come from each person who has made the journey and found some success, reaching back and extending a hand and bringing the next person forward. As the police officer that was talking about his embrace of a gang member and how that was not well received at his department, that would have been very well received by me. That's exactly what we need. We need police officers reaching out to gang members and helping them find the right path. We need role models. We need mentors. We have 17.5 million fatherless children. 43% of US households are fatherless in America. We need mentors. We need leaders. And you're not going to find them in Washington.
Yeah. Well said. Any final thoughts from any of you guys that are on here?
Can I add one more?
Yeah, sure.
Thing? You know, we're looking for things to make change. If there are any teachers in the audience, can I implore you to not make assumptions about the path that the kids are going to be on. Another organization that I'm on the board is called My Sister's Keeper, where we mentor young brown girls between the middle school and high school in STEM, because schools tend to, you know, young black or brown girls, oh, you're going to run track or you're going to do sports, and they're not pushed to do the engineering and the STEAM things because it's assumed that's not their bag. And so we have school systems and teachers that just assume, oh, well, you know, you're not going to be interested in that. And we really need to, you know, push these kids to really push them into education and to get what they need versus assuming they're not going to be interested and not offering it to them. So, you know, we really need teachers to, you know, push the STEM and all those things that are going to get those kids out of those neighborhoods and into the schools, maybe a scholarship, because they can't afford to go to these engineering schools.
Yeah.
They cannot. They need those scholarships. They need that stuff drilled into them in middle school and high school so they're ready for it.
Awesome. Thank you. It's
Hey, Bob, Richard Gillum hasn't said one thing all night.
You know,
Can you speak up,
I've
Richard?
noticed that he just sits there. Richard, thoughts?
First of all, I really enjoyed the discussion. You know, I think that there's been some great contributions here, and it's been a very pleasurable experience. I'd like to add value, but I also at times can find that the best value I can add is by just letting other people have more mic time than I would otherwise take up. I think that something that George mentioned earlier is interesting. You know, each of us did, well, except myself here, but I would certainly fall in the category had I volunteered a conversation earlier about what racism is. Each of us has a different definition. Each of us thinks of it differently. Each of us perceives it differently. And everybody wants to instinctively say, oh, that's okay. Everyone has a different definition. But actually that's not okay, because to effectively solve a problem, you have to understand that problem effectively. And right now, it doesn't seem like we as a nation really understand what the actual problem is. As we defined racism earlier, I heard each of you speak about what you perceive to be racism. And like you guys, I also have a very different definition of what I think racism is than each of you shared. But again, until we're able to effectively align that definition, it's very difficult to bring an effective prescription to solve that. So briefly, from my perspective, for what it's worth, there's a difference to me between a racist and racism. Racism to me is simply, it's a biological word. It's a flavor of tribalism. It's not good or bad in and of itself. It's simply a definition that describes a biological state. You know, I don't buy into the idea that racism is quote, learned, because I don't buy into the idea that tribalism is something we picked up on, you know, in second grade. I think that we were born with tribalism. I think that it's been ingrained. We've evolved into very successful biological organisms, but, you know, 50, 60, 70,000 years ago, tribalism was a really critical component to survival in a very competitive world with very limited resources. And today in modern society, like many things, we carry forward a lot of biological dispositions that unfortunately are no longer, they don't have a place anymore. They're not effective anymore. In fact, they're very damaging. Tribalism is one of those things, but racism is just a flavor of tribalism. We see tribalism all the time. A Yankees fan versus a Mets. You know, you'll hear these people talk about different perspectives and who they are and what they are. Racism to me is simply an expression of that innate tribalism that we all have. And so you guys asked a question earlier about what percentage of bad cops are there. I reject the question. I think that we're defining the idea of defining cops as being bad or good. They're all tribal, 100% of them. It's not 5% of them that are tribal, 100% of them are tribal. But some of them have lost their capacity to manage that tribalism. And the expression of that tribalism comes out with, in this case here, most recently, the death of George Floyd. But to suggest that, you know, well, gee, guys, good apples or bad apples, I personally am a racist. I'm a racist in the sense that I am absolutely genetically engineered to process the other in question and debate unless and until I've been able to be given a reason why this person's in my tribe. If I'm in Europe and I meet an American of any color or background, they're in my tribe. Suddenly we're bonded. We're going to go to bars and hang out and we're tight. You know, that's it. If I go to a Mets game and I see another Mets fan there, regardless of their gender, they could be any background, any persuasion, we're tight. They're now my tribe. So, you know, when we talk about different cultures, especially the richness of the Black culture in America, that creates a cultural divide. It creates a cultural divide between, let's say, South Georgia or Texas and, let's say, New York and others. These cultural divides are perfect reflections of that tribalism. And so I think that if we're going to solve the challenges we face today, we need to, and I'm not suggesting my definition is correct, of course, but we need to define what racism is and what a racist is. And today we have such a witch hunt on the idea of racism and it's evil. And guys, at least in my opinion, it's not. It's just biological. I think that every one of us is a racist. Every one of us is a tribalist, if you will, under certain examples and certain conditions. And if we're able to acknowledge that, then we can start to solve it. When I often hear so many people say, oh, I'm not a racist. Well, it's like going into a bar with a bunch of alcoholics who are all declaring they're not alcoholics. Guys, you're never going to get this problem solved. So I've got some opinions that, again, maybe not necessarily mainstream for what it's worth, but I do think, for example, the looting that's happening right now, it's really an important component. This has to happen. Kaepernick tried this peacefully. It didn't work out. If Kaepernick's peaceful version of this was successful, George would be alive today. He's not. We don't need to look at this as sort of as a concept of evil. We need to look at this as a scientific engineering problem that needs to be solved. We can socially engineer our country if we choose to. If we want to step back and use turpentine to pull away the color, the black or the white, and instead look at the dynamics in hand and determine a social engineering solution for a socially engineered problem. Oh, well now we got a chance to solve this. I think that it's important to have these kinds of conversations. Of course, I think they add value. But if we're looking to try to distill a pathway forward, because if none of us are happy with how things are today, we've all echoed that. We've all raised our hand and said, this sucks. And then we go home. We turn off the Zoom and we go back, and I'm going to go watch Netflix when this is over and probably have a beer. It's going to be great. But we don't have a specific pathway other than we've agreed that these things are good and these things are bad. Well, that's not, at least in my opinion, that's not going to get that step. Irvin and I have been talking a lot about different action items that may come out of some of these events, most recently with George's murder. And I really hope that some of you might become involved with those things. It's not my place yet to speak about those, and I'm looking forward to Irvin having a chance to share some of these opportunities later. But and I would welcome each of you on this call here to jump in if and when you'd like to become active with some of the plans that Irvin and I are cooking up here to
Love it.
introduce a new America.
Yeah. Well, we've got a conversation that matters. The Conversation Matters group, Facebook group, and this is going to go up in there. And I'm going to invite each one of you to be a member of that group, and be able to dialogue with each other as well as some of the guests that'll come through. Because I plan on doing more of these, and we've had some really great conversations that matters that we'll be posting up there as well. But this is definitely one that I think the conversation needs to continue. It's the conversation actually matters, and it needs to continue now. And so that's going to be my role. I want to make sure that we do that. So I will be looking for the invite for you guys to participate in that. And yes, please, Richard and Irvin, tell us, what's going on so that we can participate. The rest of you guys, I've kept you guys way later than we anticipated. I am grateful for each one of you for being on here, whether you've been a panelist or whether you've just been an attendee listening in. I appreciate the comments. These comments and everything will be into the group as well. So people will be able to go back, look, and check out the comments, respond to the comments. So if you see something that was directed to you or see that you want to comment, feel free to do that in the group. And like I said, everyone will have an invitation to participate. So that being said, guys, grateful for you, for your role in this world, but also for your role in my life. I'm very grateful for that. And please let me know how I can best support you as a friend, as a colleague, as another person on this planet that's spinning endlessly fast and furious. And tell me what I can do to slow it down for you to help make a difference in this world. Because I know every person on this call wants to make a difference. And as Wesley said, everyone is looking for a way to just feel heard and valued and appreciated and respected. And so let's do that for each other. I appreciate you guys. Love you guys. And thanks again. Enjoy your next level, guys.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Guys.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Great job, Bob. Amazing.
Thank
That
you.
was awesome. That was awesome.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bob.
Hey, Wesley.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. These fun people.
Hi, Bob. Thank you. That was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. Good to see you.